Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a question. If the point of the first U.S. presidential debate was for each candidate to prove how unfit the other is for office, what's the verdict? Let's get to the bottom line. U.S. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump had their first face-to-face debate, and it was obvious that the Democrats are in some serious trouble. Biden mumbled and stumbled his way through his talking points and lost his train of thought at several moments. By contrast, Trump was more energetic and displayed more self-control than he did during the 2020 debates. Both called each other liars, criminals, and the worst presidents in the country's history, and their views on America couldn't be more opposite. Trump sees a failing nation, while Biden argues that the U.S. is the envy of the world. And they trash-talked about golf. Now their campaigns are in full swing, and they'll be taking their promises straight to the American people. So who has a better chance of winning the White House this November? Today we're talking with Janelle King, former Deputy State Director for the Georgia Republican Party, and Orson Porter, political strategist and former White House political director in the Clinton administration. Orson, let me start with you and ask you, we recently saw the Democratic and Republican debate, President Trump and President Biden. How did it go for President Biden?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I think it was a tough night for Democrats overall. There's really no upside on what happened, and no one expected it. And regrettably, it was a debate that the Biden team asked for. But what I think you also saw was how many people are closely watching what's going to happen with this election. And I'm sure when you see the viewership numbers, it will be at a fairly high level. Unfortunately, I think what you saw last night on both sides is the frustrations that voters have on whether or not they're actually being listened to. And some of the policies that were brought up during the debate discussion were never fully discussed or got after or answered. And I think you will have folks, Democrats, walking away a little bit disappointed with the performance, but the voter in some of those swing states wondering, will these candidates be able to help me with some of my kitchen table issues? And unfortunately, you didn't hear a lot of that.
Janelle, do you think that Republicans out there that you're dealing with are happy with the debate performance they saw from Donald Trump?
You know what? It just depends on who you ask, because the Republican Party, as well as the Democrat Party, is kind of going through an evolution where there are some devout, I should say, supporters on both sides. However, I will say that where the Republican Party unites, even though there are several different factions, where we will unite is around the fact that we know that President Trump displayed a much better presentation during the debate. It was very clear that he has the energy, the health, and the capability to do the job. And it's unfortunate that that's where we're standing today. It's unfortunate that there are a lot of people who are feeling as though they have to bypass character and vote based on capability. That being said, I do think that President Trump is going to win in November, as long as President Biden is currently in the race or still in the race. I don't see how Biden can recover from this because what he displayed is what we have seen and what we have talked about for the last few months. So I'm interested to see what the Democrats do from here.
Orson, let me go back to you and just ask you structurally. Former Senator Claire McCaskill said Biden had one job. That was to reassure Americans that he's fit for office, and he failed. So what are your thoughts about this focus on physicality as opposed to policy and one's intellectual capabilities?
That's a good question. I mean, at the end of the day, the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, Americans want their president, and I've seen it firsthand, to be and to look presidential. And there's no debate on that. And I think there were points won on the Trump side, unfortunately for the Biden team, to that point. But I will say that you're right to say that there is a I think it's 129 days before the actual election. So there are going to be moments where each candidate may have an issue tripping over a stage or forgetting their line in a speech, and that hasn't changed, over the course of the last 100 years or so in presidential campaigns. But what has changed is the speed in which voters are able to view exactly what's happening on the campaign, and the speed at which the different campaigns are able to use those incidents to benefit their candidate. So in the Clinton administration, the news cycle didn't move as swiftly as it does now. And whatever Biden struggles he has will be in real time. The upside of that is the speed in which Americans may forget. So what I will say is it is the middle of the summer. It is right before the 4th of July holiday. And it wouldn't surprise me that the base vote that has been with him for the last year or so will forgive and forget potentially and give him a second chance to recover.
Thank you for that. Janelle, I want to, ask you, are you comfortable with many of the claims which in a fascinating way CNN didn't knock back? I mean, there were many demonstrable mistruths that President Trump laid out there. I mean, one that just glared at me were abortions after birth. That technically that would be murder.
When he spoke at the Faith and Freedom Conference recently here in Georgia, I think it was in D.C. Sorry about that. But when he spoke at that conference recently, he made a statement about abortion, and there were a lot of people there, particularly a lot of hard Republicans, that believe that we should federalize abortion in the sense of demanding that it's no longer, eradicating it basically. And so I do think that's something that may touch on him. But lastly, the physicality issue. The only reason why we're talking about physicality in this particular race is because President Trump can't talk about policy. Because President Biden can't talk about policy. His policies are failing. So now it leads us to have to talk about other issues as well. And so when you have bad policy and weak physicality, it basically just shows that he should not be in that position at all.
Orson, let me ask you, you understand the nuts and bolts, the dates, the calendar. Is it actually possible for Joe Biden to step down, to have an open convention? What are the issues of concern when it comes to the nuts and bolts of the legal apparatus of running a campaign before November 5th?
Yeah, I think, a couple key things is dates matter. So the convention is coming up August 19th through the 22nd. As I mentioned, we're 129 days until the election. States are now just starting the process of putting names on ballots, probably in mid or late August. So it doesn't give a lot of time for Democrats to put a new name on the ballot, but more importantly, before the convention, to unify around one candidate. So I would start with, there's only one person who has a decision to make here in order to even consider making this work or eliminating the discussion entirely, and that's Joe Biden. And until we hear directly from President Biden on what he is thinking, which last night you heard a forceful response from the vice president. His campaign today has been fairly vocal about staying in the race, and I would suspect at the event in North Carolina, you will hear much of the same. So personally, I don't see he making a decision anytime soon, particularly before the upcoming holiday. And if he should make a decision thereafter and decide to withdraw, that gives us a few weeks before the upcoming DNC convention in Chicago. And then, as I mentioned, only a few weeks before these early ballots go out. So, all that to say is the longer President Biden makes in making the decision whether to stay in the race or to drop out, the harder it will be for Democrats to move forward in a unified front, and more importantly, legally, to make certain that his name is on the ballot, or whomever's name is on the ballot as a replacement in all of these battleground states. You're hearing, at least on my end, a bunch of unnamed sources, but until the leader of the party speaks and says what his intentions are, I think, this is all good chatter, but very hard to believe at this point that he would make a decision to drop in the next 24 or 48 hours.
So I'm of the view, go ahead, Janelle. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree on one thing. I do agree that it's a difficult decision. It's going to be really hard to do it. However, I do disagree on the fact that we have to wait for Joe Biden to determine whether or not he's going to drop out. I truly believe that who's going to decide this are the donors. When donors say, I'm no longer investing in a candidate that is feeble and that cannot string two sentences together, that's when the decision is going to be made. I don't think it has anything to do with Biden, to be honest. I think that Biden will get to that convention, and if they decide that they no longer want to support him and they have someone else in mind, they will put that person up and they will get those delegates to vote for that person. I truly believe that that may happen. And it's because it really determines, or really it's based on whether or not the Democrat Party wants this to be competitive or they want to hand it to President Trump.
I'm interested, Orson, in your thoughts on how the communities, particularly communities of color, are going to feel if Kamala Harris isn't the automatic successor, and you actually have an open primary where, someone like California Governor Newsom, or Gina Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce, or Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, or others come in. Is there going to be a negative cloud, a dark cloud over this process that I'm not seeing?
Yeah, I think those are all things that President Biden, I'm sure, is considering as he makes his decision, which ultimately I think will be to stay in. But 100%, if you saw a different Vice President Harris last night, and a lot of people were calling me last night saying, or where was she? Why wasn't she used more often? And who is this person? And we need her more than ever, particularly in some of these base-both African-American communities. If she were to be leapfrogged through this process, which I don't think will happen, then absolutely members in the Democratic Party, particularly African-American women, will feel as though they have been wronged. And she's done everything that's been asked from the party itself. For her not to have an opportunity, I think, brings in chaos. And chaos right now for Democrats, after we saw what happened last night, is not a winning strategy. So I kind of disagree that, an exciting convention is good for Democrats. It may be good for television, but I don't think it's good for votes.
Fascinating. Janelle, you're an entrepreneur and you've been very involved with economic policy. I think it's how we first met and talked. But there was another statement that Donald Trump made last night. I'm just wondering where it stands. So we've been watching the numbers of Black community, Hispanic community, and others, and they're softer for President Biden than they were 4 years ago. President Trump is picking up some support from communities of color, but also Cornel West, Jill Stein, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are picking up some of those votes. But in the debate, Donald Trump said, he talked about Black jobs. He talked about Hispanic jobs. And I have to tell you that the hackles went up on the back of my neck. It sounded very racist to me. How did it sound to you? And does that impact the recruitment efforts to pick up some of the communities of color out there in America's political equation right now?
I feel like it was a bad choice of words. I feel like he was trying to make a point, and the way in which he went about it was just not good. But here's the thing. You're standing on stage for 90 minutes with no notes. And so a lot of it is just really coming off the top of your head. And what I think he meant to say is that jobs that are going to benefit the Black community, going to benefit the Hispanic community, whatever those jobs are. I think that's the point he was trying to make. But that being said, the minority community, particularly the Black community, it's not leaving the Democrat Party simply because of President Trump. They're leaving the Democrat Party because President Biden lied to them, because President Biden sat on a Zoom call with the NAACP and told them that he's done more for Black people than the NAACP, because he told Charlemagne on the Breakfast Club that if you don't vote for him, you're not Black. And these things started adding up. I can go on and on and on to list off all the disrespectful comments, policy, and decisions President Biden has made as it relates to the Black community. But the Black community was trying to hold on strong and continue to vote Democrat because that's what grandma and great grandma has done. And we want to continue the legacy. But now they're realizing, particularly our young Black people, that they have been sold a bag of goods, and that it is nothing but lies, and they're being manipulated consistently. So I really do believe that President Trump is picking up these voters because they feel politically homeless. They don't know who is going to put together policies that will benefit all of us instead of using us as a pawn in this political game. So I want us to continue to focus on strong policy.
To that point on policy, Orson, you know, when you do polls, you see people are worried about crime, inflation, the southern border, and immigration. And I'm interested in another big issue that has seemed to matter in recent elections in the United States, and that is abortion. And there were major differences of opinion on abortion between President Biden and President Trump last night. Orson, you know, to some degree, we're talking about individuals and how they look and perform. But are there issues like abortion that are so big that they're going to be definitive regardless of who's head of that ticket? So how is abortion going to play out?
I mean, it will play out depending upon how the messenger delivers the message. And I thought for the 2 minutes that I saw the vice president on CNN following the debate, she gave a pretty clear rallying cry on why this is a wedge issue, and more importantly, their platform on what they would do about it and serve and protect, et cetera, that, you know, over the course of the next 129 days, if it isn't the president himself, I'm 100% confident that they will find other dignitaries or ambassadors like the vice president to give a pretty clear rallying cry, as I mentioned, on how this should play out moving forward in the campaign. It is probably the third biggest issue in some of these swing states, but it all depends on how people are being educated on the platform, and more importantly, motivated by the person or the candidate on what they will do about the issue. And I thought it's a perfect example of how with African-American women or women in general or suburban women, that the vice president should be used and given that platform. And I wouldn't be surprised that you will see her speak a little bit more loudly on this issue and use more as a speaker box moving forward.
And Janelle, let me ask you about abortion, which you referenced earlier in your comments here. But, you know, are the views that are mainstream within the GOP, and they are far more conservative than I would say in the Democratic Party, does the GOP run the risk, as it clings to a very tight abortion policy, anti-abortion policy, of losing this election because of it?
I don't think we run the risk of losing the election because of it. And that's because I think the economy is the issue that most people are paying attention to. If you rank what's impacting voters on a greater level, it's the inability to be able to feed your children, right? That takes more precedent over whether or not you believe in being pro-choice or pro-life. However, I do think that it's something that we've got to get under control, because the moment the economy starts to tip in the right direction, we now shift to that second priority item, which probably is the abortion topic. That being said, Republicans, we should be winning this argument. The reason why is because we did our job. We did our due diligence. due diligence. We were able to get Roe v. Wade overturned. We were able to send it back to the states where it should be. I just want us as conservatives to realize that the government is not church. And while we are very strong as it relates to morality and morals, we have to ensure that we're keeping a separation, meaning the church is responsible for taking care of the poor. The church is responsible for initiating opportunities for people to increase in their morality. But that's not what the government is for. So let's not move it from the federal government to send it back to the federal government. Let's just stay focused. Let's allow the states to handle it, allow our pro-life organizations to do what they do on the ground as it relates to getting people on board with our mission, and then we'll move forward. But I do think that it's a topic that we've got to make sure that we have a solid answer on.
Let me just ask you both in real short form, what you would recommend so that we never end up in this situation again with two very, very, I should say, old folks that, you know, when you kind of look at other options rather, what needs to structurally change in the Democratic Party and in the GOP, in our politics, in our democracy, so that we come up with better options than doing a rerun of something that happened 4 years ago that nobody wanted? Orson?
I think, you know, the biggest thing that you saw on the Republican side was the issue of the primaries. And, you know, some may argue that they went through too quick, and Nikki Haley should have hung in there. Some would argue that maybe Biden should have had more challenged opponents through the Democratic primary. I really, truly believe, having worked on campaigns and been around them for the last 40 decades, is that primaries help candidates get better. Primaries help voters make a better decision. When you nominate candidates without any kind of full inspection or a primary process, you end up sometimes with surprises. Had there been a more vigorous debate on the Democratic side with President Biden on whether or not he should move forward, I think some of the questions that you're getting at might have been answered.
Janelle, I'm going to give you the last word.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We have to first ensure that we have an actual primary process. As voters, we need to demand that every single candidate debates. We don't get to be told what to do. We have to remember that they work for us. And lastly, I think we also need to focus in on ensuring that we are educated on what these major issues are, what these policies are, what they're doing, and then put that before all the candidates. RFK Jr. should have been on that debate stage. Chase Oliver should have been on that debate stage. This is not binary. We do have other candidates. And when you start controlling it, it becomes very authoritarian. It becomes very authoritarianism. And I believe that we are in a situation where we have to stop that. As we, the people, we have the power, demand debates.
Fascinating and important discussion. Political strategist Janelle King and Orson Porter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So what's the bottom line? What America and the world saw last week was two older candidates who we've all seen before. Donald Trump wears his age well, but Joe Biden has not had the same experience, and he clearly struggled during the debate. Now many Democratic leaders are panicking, and they're really panicking. We don't know what it means yet. Is there a chance that Biden pulls out and he opens his party convention this August to a contest among other leading and younger Democrats? That would be exciting in a lot of ways, and perhaps be exactly the kind of thing to jumpstart a real discussion about what America wants to do with its flailing democracy. And that's the bottom line.